No one in Britain saw this coming. Not the Royal Air Force, not the Defense Ministry, and definitely not the pilots who've spent decades believing the RAF ruled Europe's skies. But today, that confidence has been shaken. Not by America, not by Russia, but by a small, quiet country that everyone underestimated. Because the jet that's now embarrassing Britain's Royal Air Force isn't some flashy stealth monster or billion-dollar beast. It's the underdog from Sweden, the Saab Gripen. For decades, the Royal Air Force has been one of NATO's crown jewels. The Tornado, the Typhoon, aircraft built to dominate. Britain's air power was legendary and expensive. But in a world where modern warfare moves faster than politics can adapt, even legends can be humbled. Because while Britain kept upgrading its Eurofighter Typhoons and investing billions in F-35s, Sweden quietly built something different. Not a jet to win on paper, but to win in reality. That jet was the Gripen E, a fighter so efficient, so flexible, and so unexpectedly capable that it's now outperforming RAF aircraft in ways no one thought possible. The stage for this embarrassment was set years ago. When Europe's air forces began modernizing, Britain and its partners doubled down on the Eurofighter Typhoon. A stunning machine, yes, but one born from a Cold War mindset. Big, loud, expensive. Meanwhile, Sweden, with no nuclear arsenal and no NATO membership at the time, had to think differently. They couldn't afford to build a super jet. They needed a survivor, something that could take off from a highway, refuel from a truck, fight back even after the first missiles fell. That philosophy birthed the Gripen, and while other nations mocked it for being too small or too cheap, Sweden knew exactly what it was doing. Then came the exercises, those quiet but brutal NATO war games where reputations are made and destroyed. And this is where the RAF began to feel the heat. Because every time Gripens went up against more advanced or expensive jets, including the Typhoon, the results were uncomfortable. Pilots described it as fighting a ghost. The Gripen's electronic warfare systems, smaller, smarter, and constantly evolving, jammed radars, confused sensors, and turned mock battles into chaos. One NATO pilot admitted, half laughing, half frustrated, "It's like trying to punch smoke." And it wasn't just about the tech, it was how fast the Gripen could turn, rearm, and get back in the sky. While a Typhoon might take hours to prepare for another sortie, a Gripen could be refueled and rearmed in under 10 minutes by 5 ground crew on a road. That kind of agility isn't glamorous, but it's terrifyingly effective. So when Sweden joined NATO, many assumed Stockholm would simply play along quietly in the alliance. Instead, it started making waves. In joint exercises with the RAF, Gripens have repeatedly demonstrated capabilities that forced British planners to take notice. In cold weather conditions, in radar jamming drills, in tactical response times, Gripen didn't just keep up, it outperformed. And for the RAF, that stings. Because this isn't supposed to happen. The Royal Air Force has some of the best trained pilots and the most expensive airframes in Europe. Billions poured into stealth fighters, sensors, and multinational development programs. Yet here was Sweden, a country spending a fraction of the budget, showing that brains might just beat budgets. Let's talk specifics. During one NATO exercise in Northern Europe, Gripens managed to complete more sorties per day than Typhoons, despite operating from makeshift runways in sub-zero conditions. British jets required larger bases, complex maintenance crews, and hours of prep. Gripens just kept flying. And when it came to electronic warfare, Saab's homegrown EW suite, developed in collaboration with the same team that builds Sweden's top submarines, turned out to be one of the most advanced in the world. It didn't just defend the jet, it manipulated the battle space. Enemy radars couldn't get a lock. Missiles lost track. And in simulated engagements, Gripen scored kills against aircraft that cost twice as much. The irony? Britain helped pioneer advanced radar tech. And now, its own systems were being fooled by a Swedish export. But the humiliation didn't stop in the skies. It extended to economics, the area governments hate to talk about. While Britain pays roughly $35,000 per hour to fly a Typhoon, and even more for the F-35, the Gripen E costs closer to $6,000. And it can be maintained by ordinary ground crews, not elite specialists flown in from contractors. So when RAF planners looked at sortie rates, readiness levels, and cost per hour metrics, the math told an uncomfortable story. The Gripen wasn't just good, it was efficient, practical, sustainable. Of course, no one in the RAF will openly admit embarrassment, not officially. But the shift in tone is hard to ignore. British pilots who've flown alongside Gripens have called them astonishingly capable. NATO reports quietly highlight Sweden's exceptional readiness. And behind closed doors, procurement officers are re-evaluating what kind of air force the future really needs. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Britain built its strategy around prestige platforms like the F-35, but those jets can't always do the dirty work. The stealth advantage is powerful, until you're operating in freezing weather from improvised bases with limited logistics. That's when Gripen thrives. It's the soldier who doesn't need perfect conditions to fight, the one who wins because he can adapt. The deeper irony? Britain once had that same spirit. The Spitfire in World War II, small, fast, built under pressure, underestimated by everyone. That's the Gripen's story today. Only now, it's the Swedish flag painted on the tail. As global tensions rise, especially in the Arctic and Baltic, Sweden's approach is suddenly looking prophetic. While NATO countries struggle to keep their ultra-expensive jets mission-ready, Gripens are flying daily, training relentlessly, and adapting to modern threats. They're ready for the kind of war that's messy, unpredictable, and fast-moving. And that readiness, that ability to actually fight tomorrow, is exactly what's making Britain nervous. Because what do you do when a jet built by a smaller, cheaper, quieter nation can outperform yours in almost every category that matters? You start asking hard questions. Now, there's talk in European defense circles. Some say the Gripen could replace aging Typhoons and smaller NATO air forces. Others whisper about a Gripen moment, where practicality finally overtakes prestige. And for the RAF, whose legacy is built on pride and power, that's a bitter pill to swallow. But Sweden's success isn't just about a jet. It's about philosophy. Where others built aircraft to impress on paper, Sweden built one to survive reality. Where others chased stealth, Sweden chased sustainability. And that's proving to be the smarter bet. The Royal Air Force will adapt. It always does. The days of massive, fragile, billion-dollar fighters may be numbered. The future belongs to aircraft that can fight more often, cost less, and still dominate when it counts. And right now, that future looks a lot like the Gripen. So yes, Britain is embarrassed. Not because its pilots failed, but because its priorities did. Because while it poured fortunes into complexity, Sweden quietly mastered simplicity. And now, as the world watches these two nations fly side by side, the lesson is crystal clear. You don't need the biggest budget to rule the skies. You just need the smartest jet. In a sky filled with superpowers and stealth machines, it's the smallest, cleverest fighter that's stealing the show. The one that makes the old guard nervous and the new generation inspired. Because Sweden didn't build a jet to impress the world. They built one to survive it. And in doing so, they've just embarrassed one of the world's proudest air forces. The Royal Air Force may have history on its side, but the Gripen has the future in its hands.